Hello, friends. Welcome back to the channel. This is your brother Lawrence, and today we are going to look at the most recent video of Pastor Ron Kelly addressing the leadership of the Michigan Conference. Friends, some SDAs have already commented on the video of Pastor Ron Kelly, stating that Pastor Ron Kelly spoke the truth in humility. So let's get into the video and listen to what Pastor Ron Kelly has to say in addressing the leadership of the Michigan Conference. All right, let me pull the video right here and let's watch it together.
In the summer of 1861, James White was burdened with the growing responsibilities of managing the assets and ministries for the Great Advent Movement. So he made a trip east with his wife to make a case for organization of the churches. The journey, in his own words, was very disappointing. He met with either resistance or silence. Some of the leading ministers refused to cooperate with what was the most obvious need of this growing movement: order and organization. Frederick Wheeler, a pioneer of the faith, at a business meeting in Roosevelt, New York, remained seated. When James called for all in favor of organization, please stand, it was devastating to White. R.F. Cottrell, writing in the review, stated that Brother White was in favor of something dreadful. Of course, many of these brethren had been mistreated at the hands of the organized churches not too many years prior to this moment, so a bit of caution is understood. But writing on August 27, White made this stinging commentary: "Our ministers are generally silent." And later he added, "Others were secretly in favor of organization, but dared not advocate it openly until the scale turned in its favor." White wasn't sure what to do, but eventually what couldn't be done on a large scale was begun on a small one. The publishing work was organized in the fall of 1861, and this delivered James from being the sole proprietor of the assets and main burden bearer of the ministry. The next step was the organization of a church. On October 8, the building block for what would become the Seventh-day Adventist Church was laid. It was in the formation of a local congregation, the Battle Creek Church. Before a conference or a union, a division or a general conference, there were churches. And it seems probable, considering the prophetic events that are described in Revelation chapter 13, that in the future, when the world seeks to dismantle our organization, there will still be churches. They may be meeting in orchards or caves or forest glens, but there will still be groups of people gathering, the smallest cell, you might say, of the Great Advent Movement. And yet, there is no organism or organization that's not ultimately built on the order of local congregations. A conference is a sisterhood of churches, and while we do not believe in the completely autonomous congregational model that has no concern for the larger work, we do believe in the authority, autonomy, and spirit-filled necessity of churches that are united and led by the Holy Spirit. Almost 6 months ago, a major wound was delivered to one of those leading Adventist churches, a vibrant congregation with an unusual degree of unity, liberality, and mission-mindedness. The leadership was trusted by the body and was working in conjunction with the local conference. The manifold blessings of the Lord were upon this group, and they were discovering ministries, rediscovering ministries, and expanding the work of God. A dispute arose over the treatment of one of the well-known members of this church. The church, even though alarmed and contesting the manner in which the member and his rights had been processed, complied with the conference directive and enforced the ban keeping the local member from preaching. The member was under no discipline, was also a local elder in regular standing, and was an ordained minister. He was kept from exercising rights and authorities conveyed by both the local church and the union upon his ordination to gospel ministry. While it is completely understood that various things that he said were not appreciated by everyone, it remains the opinion of many fair-minded Christians that a hearing of the issues, not a banning of the subject or the person, was the gospel order of resolution. The matter was further complicated when some in leadership applied pressure to the local church to mimic the conference and discipline the member from leadership roles in the local congregation. Other ministries, it was stated, would not receive the cooperation on a conference level that was needed until local leadership understood the situation as conference leadership did. The senior pastor, understanding that this tactic would wound the church if brought into public view, worked prayerfully to keep the matter behind closed doors. Needless to say, when this became impossible, it met with strong disapproval from the local church, who could not see how the banning of one of its local members was related to its medical or educational ministries. Strong and direct objections were made to what appeared to almost all as undue pressure at best and administrative extortion at worst. The resulting strong disagreement behind closed doors led to the dismissal of the senior pastor, who was unwilling to surrender the civic and gospel order of discovery and due process in determining truth. The abruptness of the dismissal after 37 years of ministry, 11 of which had transpired at that local church, elicited objection by the vast majority of membership who gathered en masse to express their disapproval. They, like any family who watched the abuse of another family member, protested vociferously.
Time is short. If we don't disentangle ourselves somehow from the state, expect to be thrown under the bus in the next pandemic again. We are sinning corporately, holding money above God and the people that He loves so dearly. It is very, very hard to be a cheerful and careful steward of God's tithe when we witness all the blatant apostasy around us that is tolerated, but then Village is hit with a lightning bolt of injustice for simply speaking the plain truth.
This protest, poorly understood and rejected as illegitimate by some, has now been postured as rebellion or war against the conference-level leadership. Rebellion, however, would require the rejection of legitimate authority, which is at the very heart of the current discussion. Is the church a franchise of the administration or a sister in a sisterhood of family members? While we don't espouse congregationalism, nor do we embrace corporatism, many prayerful and thinking Christians are now reevaluating what is the proper trust-respect relationship between the conference and a local church. Is the local conference a franchise or a partner in an alliance? Currently, the local church believes that an honest effort to discover truth, protect unity, and further the work of the Great Commission requires a hearing by the sisterhood of churches. Is this a distraction or a diversion from the Gospel Commission? Potentially. And yet, is it any more avoidable than any effort would be required if dysfunction was in a certain family system? This is about the future health of the organization. Is it possible that this situation is a catalyst of awakening for many members and many churches? Could good emerge from this situation for the recalibrating of the dynamics of power and the engagement between the conference and the local church? It appears that somewhere in the drift of years, profound ignorance has developed around the very first work of organization in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which was the formation of a local congregation. These bodies of believers are tasked with seeking the Holy Spirit to understand how they ought to pursue the Great Commission. The local church in question was experiencing the exceptional favor of heaven in its various missions, ministries, giving, and property acquisitions. It was pioneering the rediscovery of the medical missionary work in conjunction with the local conference. And just months prior, before a key physician relocated to the community to assist in the work, he affirmed with the local conference that the relationship between the church and the conference was good, and he was assured that it was. If the senior pastor was as problematic as the 6 hours of arraignment to his 100 fellow pastors purported him to be, was it proper to leave him without formal warning, without objecting in his personnel folder? And was it wise to nominate him 2 times to represent the conference on the North American Division Executive Committee? Was his continued role as a district superintendent warranted? And should not a warning have been given to the major donors who believed in his leadership and made large donation to the church's efforts? Would a dialogue with the head elder or the associate head elder have allowed for remediation? All of this leaves fair-minded men and women questioning if this is God's way of solving problems and dealing with people. And what are we going to do to make it right? On December 21, a 51-minute video entitled, "Is the Michigan Conference an Apostasy?" was released regarding the situation. This video alleges that discussing the placement of tithe in any repository other than the conference is false doctrine. While this subject is worthy of discussion, one must initially ask if this really constitutes false doctrine. Church membership cannot be lost for not returning tithe, and unfortunately most churches have roughly 1/2 to 2/3 of their members who do not. What is also missing from the discussion are the exceptions to returning tithe through the regular lines that are a legitimate, though not well-known part of our church history. So does the subject matter merit the moniker false doctrine? Or is this a verbal launching pad of prescribed guilt? And beyond these historic and theological questions is the reality that the tithe at the local church had dramatically increased from $1 million to $3 million over the 11+ years of the senior pastor's tenure. If the entire local conference had grown by the same percentages, the tithe would exceed $100 million, and there would be multiple workers where now there is one. Perhaps also worthy of reflection is this statement in Acts of the Apostles, page 344. Spiritual prosperity is closely bound up with Christian liberality. Is it possible that deep spiritual growth was fueling this generosity? The author of the video fails to state that he works in the conference office, that he was invited to sit through the entirety of the deliberations with the conference committee that had led to the senior pastor's separation from his local church, and that he had been opposing the messaging coming from the local church's religious liberty weekends. He also leads the listening audience to believe that the senior pastor hijacked the meetings that were held with the district superintendents, when in fact it was the conference president's choice to change the focus of these meetings and to attempt to mitigate the intense agitation over the banning of a prominent member. It appears that a serious conflict of interest and lack of clarity in his involvement is woven through this unofficial but never repudiated video, which video is also in all likelihood a violation of church policy. The video asserts that the senior pastor did not do his job, should not have had to been told to do his job, and was thus needing to be replaced. This unofficial narrative does seem to many to reflect the real reason that so much trauma has come upon this local church, even though these were not the reasons given in the beginning for the senior pastor's removal. And lastly, the video leaves a somber warning that, like Dudley Canright, the gifted and unsettled pastor friend of James and Ellen White, who eventually left the Adventist church, the pastor might be dangerously close to losing his way. A direct phone call to the so-called pastor friend in question before the video was released would have probably left a more heartfelt sense of appeal, as opposed to an appearance of administrative apologetics. The phone call would still be welcomed. The dismissal of the senior pastor was followed by what can only be described as the largest and longest personnel committee in the history of the Adventist Church, where for 6 hours on December 10 and for another 2 hours on January 28, extensive details and commentary were shared with pastors and wives, attempting to leave no doubt that appropriate and warranted steps had been taken in the removal of the pastor. Included in this session was the admonition to the hearers to share what they had heard. All of this leaves the concept of confidentiality, professionality, and basic Christianity gravely wounded. Many more details and dynamics have been, could be, and probably should be examined. The question at hand is this: is this the Bible method for the discovery of truth? Are these the methods that functional families or even successful organizations utilize to create healthy resolutions and cultures that win? Does utilizing at-will employment law, not the Bible, not the church manual, to bring a quick and decided end to employment, make for the best team building and strong and vibrant cultures, or the discovery of truth? Does truth matter? And is this why the Bible states that every man seems right until you examine all the evidence? The larger question at hand is, can a church that defines itself by the keeping of the law and the spirit of prophecy remain true if its methods stifle the prophetic voice and the role of their pastors? Does having ministers working under at-will employment law and culture negatively impact their prophetic role to speak up and disagree with the denomination? If so, what will we do to protect ourselves from ourselves? This may be our most important danger. Various organizations have whistleblower bylaws and policies. Are we immune to similar dynamics? Or does the church have an unwritten 29th fundamental belief in its own infallibility? So what is a local church? And what are the prerogatives and responsibilities that come with being part of a local church? What is a conference? And what does a conference president have by way of rights, roles, and responsibilities? How do we achieve accountability in a postmodern culture? Do we have enough resolve? Are we committed to the truth in all places, times, and circumstances? Do we have the courage to stand for the right though the heavens fall? And what about calling sin by its right name, even in the church, including the organization and the leader's decisions? In the fall of 1862, 1 year after the organization of the first major church in Battle Creek, the Michigan Conference was formed. It was and remains a sisterhood of churches. In April of 1863, the conferences gathered together and formed the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. And here we are today. The question is, who are we and what are we becoming? How will we conduct ourselves? And what kind of legacy we will leave our children and the watching world? This depends primarily on the love and courage of the men and women who've devoted themselves to God. I encourage you to read from the Testimonies to Ministers in the chapters entitled Under Which Banner? And the Lord has a controversy with his people. Writing in the devotional From the Heart, Ellen White states that the Church of Christ, enfeebled and defective as she may appear, is the one object on earth in which he bestows, in a special sense, his love and regard. A very similar quotation in Testimonies to Ministers includes a prescription for the ongoing health of the church. On page 49, she states, "The church, enfeebled and defective, needing to be reproved, warned, and counseled, is the only object upon which Christ bestows his supreme regard." Who is to do this prophetic work? Is it a coincidence that the quotation is in Testimonies to Ministers and it calls for reproving, warning, and counseling, even the church? Perhaps this is a major part of the pastoral duties of ministers. And rather than excise the pastors who are doing it out of the church, we should listen, discuss, pray, and if necessary, humble ourselves in the sight of the Lord. History shows us that Ellen White spent the first years of her ministry building up the institution we so love, and so much of the last protecting the church from its own organization. Perhaps there's nothing new under the sun. In her day, as in ours, we echo the words of Paul, writing to the Galatians, "Have I become your enemy for telling you the truth?" May God help us all to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly as we face ourselves and the future. May self-interest not smother deep convictions of the soul. May our ministers have convictions and live them out, no matter what the circumstances. May our church return to its pursuit of truth for all, in all circumstances, and may God strengthen us for what is coming. If we go forward unwilling to pay the price of honest discussions and honest dealing, enfeebled and defective we will remain. On the other hand, truth, kindness, and commitment will do for the world church what it did for the village church. Make a congregation like an army, terrible and with banners. The choice is ours. Lead on, O King Eternal.
All right, so friends, the video of Pastor Ron Kelly addressed a specific leadership issue in the Michigan Conference. And so the video does not apply to every single leader in the church. Like, Pastor Ron Kelly was not talking about all SDA leaders. He was addressing a specific leadership issue in the Michigan Conference. And I understand Pastor Ron Kelly. I understand how it pains his heart to see some of the leaders of the church handling issue in a very different way. I understand that, friends. And there is something that E.G. White actually wrote about the kind of leaders the church needs, or the kind of leaders we need in these last days, friends. Faithful and picked men are needed at the head of the work. Let me repeat that. Faithful and picked men are needed at the head of the work. Those who have not had any experience in bearing burdens and who do not wish to have that experience should not, on any account, live there. Men are wanted who will watch for souls as they that must give an account. I appeal to the people of God, wherever they may be found. Awake to your duty. Take it to heart that we are really living amid the perils of the last days. So this is a wonderful statement coming from Ellen White concerning the kind of leaders that the church needs in this end time. Friends, in this end time. So God does not need leaders that are selfish to run his church in this end time. God does not need leaders that are dictators to run his church in this end time. God does not need leaders who are only in for the money to run his church in this end time. Leadership crisis in some of the conferences. I am not saying all of the conferences. I am saying in some of the conferences. Leadership crisis, friends. And so, as I said, I really understand Pastor Ron Kelly. And if you have been following the story, you would actually notice that the Michigan conference did not handle the issue well. So, friends, I don't have anything more to say about this. I want to hear from you in the comment section. What do you think about what Pastor Ron Kelly has just shared? I think he shared this video about 18 hours ago. So let me know what you think about the video of Pastor Ron Kelly in the comments. Thanks for watching. This is your brother Lawrence. See you next time, and God bless.